Imagine standing in the heart of ancient Rome, the marble floors of the Senate glistening under torchlight. Outside, the city hums with life, unaware that within these walls, history is about to change forever. It is March 15th, 44 BC, the day forever remembered as the Ides of March. Julius Caesar, Rome's most powerful leader, walks confidently into the chamber, believing he is surrounded by allies, by men he trusts with his life. Yet in moments, those very hands will strike him down. And when he turns and sees Brutus, his closest friend, deliver the final blow, his words echo through time. Et tu, Brute. This is not just a tale of politics and power. It is a story of trust, betrayal, and the fragile line between loyalty and fear. And though it unfolded more than 2,000 years ago, its lessons are still with us. Because each of us, in our own way, has faced betrayal. At work, in friendship, in love. So today, we will journey through Caesar's story, not to relive the tragedy, but to uncover the truths it still whispers to us. Stay with me, because what happened to Caesar can illuminate the hidden struggles of our own lives. Before betrayal ever touched his life, Julius Caesar was not simply a man of ambition. He was a man shaped by hardship. Born into a family of noble lineage but modest means, Caesar learned early that survival in Rome required both courage and strategy. When political tides shifted against him, he was forced into exile, stripped of protection and power. Yet instead of surrendering, he sharpened his mind, studied philosophy, and learned how leaders rise and fall. As he returned to Rome, Caesar built his reputation not just on words, but on actions. He earned loyalty by walking beside his soldiers, enduring the same hunger and cold. In battle, he was not distant on a hilltop, but present, leading from the front. His victories in Gaul made him a hero to the people, but a threat to the Senate. Here we see the beginning of a timeless truth. The more you rise, the more others may fear your light. Emotionally, Caesar's story speaks to anyone who has struggled against doubt or opposition. His ascent reminds us that even in moments when the world turns its back, perseverance can build a foundation no one expects. If you've ever faced setbacks, let Caesar's rise remind you that every fall is training for a greater climb. But with great power comes greater resistance, and it was Rome's own leaders who began to conspire against him. As Caesar's victories multiplied, so did whispers in the Senate. To Rome's traditional elites, Caesar was not a savior, but a storm. His growing popularity with the people, and more dangerously, with his battle-hardened soldiers, threatened the delicate balance of power that had kept Rome's republic intact. Senators who once saw themselves as guardians of Rome now felt like pawns on Caesar's expanding chessboard. Imagine being in their position, decades of privilege and influence suddenly overshadowed by a man who seemed unstoppable. Caesar's charisma in public, his discipline in war, and his generosity toward veterans made him beloved. To the Senate, this love was dangerous. If one man commanded such loyalty, what place remained for the rest? Emotionally, this moment speaks to a universal fear. The fear of being replaced, of watching your relevance diminish while another's light shines brighter. We see it in politics, in workplaces, even in friendships. Success in one person can awaken insecurity in another. Caesar's story here is not just about ambition, but about how fear can blind us. Instead of working with Caesar to strengthen Rome, many senators chose suspicion. They forgot that envy is a poor shield against destiny. Think of a time when someone else's rise unsettled you. What if, instead of resisting, you had partnered? This fear set the stage for the most fateful crossing of Caesar's life, the Rubicon. The year was 49 BCE. Caesar stood before the Rubicon River, a modest stream that carried immense weight in history. Roman law forbade generals from crossing into Italy with their legions. Doing so was an act of treason, a declaration of war against the Republic itself. For Caesar, the choice was clear: obey the Senate's order to disband his army or defy them and seize destiny. In that moment, he reportedly uttered the words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. And with that, he marched his soldiers across the river, forever changing Rome. This wasn't just a military move. It was a statement that loyalty and courage were worth more than tradition and fear. His men followed, not because they were ordered to, but because they trusted him with their lives. Emotionally, this decision reflects a timeless truth. Every one of us faces a Rubicon at some point. A line that once crossed commits us fully, whether it's leaving a job, starting a business, or standing up for a belief. Like Caesar, we rarely know the outcome. What we do know is that indecision suffocates, while action defines us. Ask yourself, what Rubicon lies before you today, waiting for your courage to cross? Yet bold steps have consequences, and Caesar's rise soon brought Rome to the edge of civil war. As Caesar's legions crossed into Italy, panic rippled through the Senate. Pompey the Great, once Caesar's ally, now his rival, retreated to Greece to rally forces. The Republic was split, not just by armies, but by loyalty, fear, and ambition. Caesar, moving with speed and strategy, advanced through Italy almost unopposed, his charisma pulling more men to his side. But this was no simple conquest. It was a brother against brother struggle, Romans fighting Romans, a nation tearing itself apart. Caesar, however, carried an edge. He inspired loyalty not with promises of gold, but with a vision of dignity and fairness for his soldiers. He ate with them, marched with them, and often shared in their hardships. This bond turned ordinary men into an unstoppable force. The emotional weight of this chapter is striking. War is always brutal, but what we see here is the cost of betrayal and ambition. Caesar's rise was built not just on strategy, but on human trust, something fragile and priceless. And here's the lesson: leadership is never about the title. It's about the willingness to shoulder the same burdens as those who follow you. Trust, once earned, can move mountains, or in Caesar's case, topple republics. Reflect for a moment. Are you leading in a way that makes others want to follow, even through hardship? Yet while victory brought Caesar power, it also planted the seeds of envy and conspiracy in the shadows of Rome. After defeating Pompey and securing victory in the Civil War, Caesar returned to Rome not just as a hero, but as the unrivaled master of the Republic. The Senate granted him extraordinary powers, first as consul, then as dictator for 10 years, and eventually dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. To the common people, he was a savior who reduced debts, expanded citizenship, and launched reforms that promised stability. But to the Senate, especially the old guard, he was beginning to look less like a liberator and more like a king. Rome had long despised monarchy. The very word rex, king, was poison to the Roman identity. And yet Caesar's growing authority, his statues, his throne-like seat at public events, and even his divine honors began to blur the line. Friends turned uneasy. Allies grew suspicious. The Senate's whispers grew louder. Was Caesar dismantling the republic they had sworn to protect? This moment reveals a timeless truth. Power, when concentrated, often breeds both admiration and resentment. Caesar's reforms showed his brilliance as a leader, but his unwillingness, or perhaps inability, to share power sowed fear in the very people meant to uphold him. Think about it. When success lifts you higher, how do you balance leadership with humility? In that tension between admiration and fear, the stage was set for betrayal, and the conspirators began to move in secret. As Caesar's power grew, so too did the unease among Rome's elite. Senators who once applauded his victories now gathered in whispered circles, their pride bruised, their vision of the Republic slipping away. They called themselves liberators, not assassins. Among them stood Brutus, Cassius, and other men who had benefited from Caesar's generosity. Yet gratitude gave way to fear. If Caesar truly became king, the Republic's centuries-old tradition of shared power would be dead. Imagine the weight of their decision. Brutus, known for his honor, was torn between loyalty to a friend and loyalty to Rome. Cassius, more pragmatic and envious, pressed him with arguments. Caesar was ambitious, and ambition would strangle liberty. The conspiracy grew, fueled not only by fear of tyranny, but also by bruised egos and political survival. This was not just politics, it was deeply personal. Rome was a society built on dignitas, personal honor, and auctoritas, influence. To many senators, Caesar's dominance was not merely unlawful, it was humiliating. And humiliation, history shows us, can often be a sharper blade than hatred. Ask yourself, when fear and pride collide, which one drives the choices we make? With daggers sharpened and loyalties divided, the Ides of March drew closer, carrying with it one of history's most unforgettable betrayals. March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March. On that morning, Caesar awoke to troubling omens. His wife, Calpurnia, had dreamt of his death. Friends urged him to stay home. Yet Caesar, confident in his destiny, dismissed the warnings. After all, hadn't he survived countless battles, rebellions, and betrayals already? Why should this day be any different? As he entered the theater of Pompeii, the place chosen for the Senate's meeting, dozens of men surrounded him. It began with words, subtle positioning, a pretense of respect. Then suddenly, a dagger flashed. One thrust, then another, until steel rained upon him. Historians tell us there were more than 20 wounds. And then, those immortal words. Seeing Brutus among his attackers, Caesar whispered, "Et tu, Brute?" "You too, Brutus." In that moment, the great general did not fight back. He simply pulled his toga over his face and collapsed beneath the statue of Pompey, a man he had once defeated. The Ides of March became not just the end of Caesar, but a symbol of ultimate betrayal. A reminder that power is never safe from envy, nor friendship safe from fear. How often do we ignore warnings, believing we are untouchable? Yet Caesar's death was not the end of his influence. In fact, it was only the beginning of a legacy and a civil war that would reshape the world. When Caesar fell, the conspirators believed they had saved Rome. They imagined the people would cheer the restoration of the Republic, grateful for their so-called liberation. But reality struck differently. Instead of joy, Rome was plunged into shock, grief, and chaos. The sight of Caesar's lifeless body carried through the forum did not spark celebration. It ignited anger. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally, seized the moment. With powerful oratory, he turned the tide of public opinion. Standing before the people, he lifted Caesar's torn and bloodied cloak, showing each wound, naming each senator who struck it. His voice shook with grief and fury as he asked, "Was this ambition?" When the poor cried, Caesar wept. Yet they call it ambition. The crowd erupted, their sorrow transforming into rage. Riots filled the streets. The conspirators, once proud saviors, fled for their lives, hunted by the very citizens they thought they'd freed. Rome teetered on the edge of anarchy. And out of this turmoil, new figures rose. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Antony himself, ready to claim Caesar's mantle. Here lies the deeper truth. Betrayal rarely brings peace. More often, it opens wounds that cannot heal, leading to consequences far greater than anyone imagines. Consider this. Have you ever seen an act meant to save a situation only create greater chaos? From this storm emerged not the rebirth of a republic, but the dawn of an empire. In the wake of Caesar's death, Rome did not return to its old republic. Instead, the city unraveled into civil war. Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of the conspiracy, tried to rally support, but the people's loyalty had already shifted. Caesar's name carried a weight they could not erase. His death created not closure, but a vacuum. And vacuums in history rarely stay empty for long. Two men stepped forward, Mark Antony, Caesar's closest ally, and Octavian, his young adopted heir. Together, they promised to avenge Caesar. For a time, they united against the conspirators, defeating Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi. Yet once their enemies were gone, ambition divided them. Antony sought power in the east alongside Cleopatra, while Octavian consolidated control in Rome. The stage was set for another confrontation. Out of blood and betrayal, a new order rose. Octavian, after defeating Antony and Cleopatra, took the title Augustus. With him, the Roman Republic officially ended, and the Roman Empire was born. Ironically, the conspirators who feared a king had, through their daggers, paved the way for an emperor far more powerful than Caesar had ever been. Doesn't history often show us that trying to control the future sometimes accelerates the very change we fear? Yet beyond politics and war, Caesar's story endures for another reason. Because betrayal is not just history. It is a mirror to our own human struggles. Betrayal is more than a political act. It is a wound of the soul. What made Caesar's death unforgettable was not simply that he was killed, but that he was killed by those closest to him. The sting of Brutus's dagger went deeper than any other, not because it pierced his body, but because it pierced his trust. That moment has echoed across centuries as a warning. The sharpest blades are often carried by those we allow closest to our hearts. But here lies the paradox. Without trust, no relationship or society can thrive. To live fully, we must risk vulnerability. Caesar risked it, and so do we. Betrayal reminds us of the fragile balance between power and loyalty, between ambition and love. It teaches us not only caution, but also resilience. In our daily lives, betrayal might not come with daggers, but with broken promises, abandoned friendships, or workplace politics. And yet, like Rome, we can choose how to respond, with bitterness that deepens the wound, or with strength that transforms pain into wisdom. Think for a moment. When trust has been broken in your life, did it destroy you, or did it shape you into someone wiser? And so, as we close Caesar's chapter, we're left with one final truth, a legacy of pain that still carries a seed of hope. The story of Julius Caesar is not just about one man's rise and fall. It is about us. It is about the fragile threads of trust that bind families, friendships, and even nations together. When Caesar fell beneath the daggers of his closest allies, Rome learned a hard truth. Betrayal never ends with the act itself. It ripples outward, reshaping lives, shattering bonds, and changing the course of history. Yet within this tragedy lies something deeply human. Betrayal, as painful as it is, also forces us to confront what we value most. Caesar's death sparked the end of a republic, but it also birthed an empire that shaped the world for centuries. Pain became transformation. Out of the ashes of trust broken, new power rose. And so we must ask ourselves, when trust is broken in our own lives, what do we do? Do we allow it to harden us into cynicism, or do we allow it to refine us into wisdom? Caesar's legacy urges us to look deeper, to remember that even the darkest wounds can lead to new beginnings. If there's one takeaway, it is this: betrayal will touch us all, but it does not have to define us. What defines us is our response, the courage to rebuild trust, the strength to move forward, and the wisdom to grow from pain. If this story has stirred something in you, don't stop here. Explore more with us, stories of resilience, power, and hope that continue to echo across time. Subscribe, stay connected, and let's keep learning together. Because history is not just about the past, it is a mirror for the battles we face today.